Well, if you've been watching the news lately, you already know there's a massive, multi-day, severe weather threat bearing down on millions of us across the U.S. Today, we aren't just going to look at rain and sun icons on a map. Instead, we're going to put on our meteorologist hats and actually decode the underlying mechanics behind this potential disaster. We're going to give you the exact why behind what's happening right now in our skies.
Have you ever just looked up at a pitch black sky and thought, what actually creates such a violent, continuous chain of storms? Like, how does one single weather pattern manage to threaten everyone from the Midwest all the way down to the Deep South? Let's turn this standard weather alert into a bit of a masterclass, peel back the layers of the atmosphere, and really figure it out together.
Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We'll be covering the overall weather picture, the mechanics of how these storms are forming, the evolution of the risks, those serious flooding warnings, and finally, the frost risk. Part 1. The overall weather picture.
So the core reason things are so incredibly volatile right now is this massive feature anchored over the map. It's an expansive, upper-level trough stretching from southeast Canada all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Think of it as a giant, invisible valley high up in the atmosphere, and it's practically steering and shaping the entire flow of weather over the eastern half of the country.
Moving on to Part 2, storm formation mechanics.
All right, let's really lean into the meteorology here for those of you in the risk zones. An upper-level trough is basically just this long, stretched-out area of low atmospheric pressure. But here's the catch. The truly dangerous characteristic of this specific trough lies on its southern flanks. This is the highly unstable zone that meteorologists watch like a hawk. Right now, northern Florida is just getting hammered by storms, and it's simply because they're pinned right underneath that volatile southern edge. Now, something absolutely crucial to understand is the concept of the dew point. Basically, it's the temperature the air needs to cool down to in order to become completely saturated with water vapor. The higher the dew point, the more suffocatingly humid the air is, which provides prime fuel for storms. And in this current system, we're seeing a really unique meteorological event. Deep moisture from the Pacific is traveling inland and perfectly coupling with a massive, heavy air mass from the Gulf of Mexico. Honestly, it's like pouring thousands of gallons of gasoline straight onto smoldering embers. When you put all of this together, well, you've got a flawless recipe for destruction. Let's connect the clues step by step. Step 1. That upper-level trough anchors on the East Coast, whipping up intense instability. Step 2. Endless, deep moisture from the Pacific and the Gulf gets vacuumed right into that unstable area. And finally, Step 3, the trigger. A strong, cold front drops south. It basically acts like a giant bulldozer, violently scooping all that hot, humid air upward and triggering an absolute atmospheric explosion.
Part 3, evolution of risks.
So how is this actually going to play out? The trajectory of this monster is shifting every single day. On Monday, we're seeing lower-end risks popping up in the Midwest, hitting areas like St. Louis and Kansas City. By Tuesday, the threat intensifies and drops down into the Mid-South, targeting places like Dallas, Fort Worth, and Little Rock. But the absolute worst escalation, that happens on Wednesday, when the entire system slams directly into the Deep South.
Now, you might be wondering, why is Wednesday the absolute most dangerous day? Well, it all comes down to those dew points we just talked about. They're going to be spiking into the upper 60s, practically brushing up against 70 degrees Fahrenheit. In meteorology terms, that means the atmosphere is just completely choked with moisture. This dramatic spike right along the I-35 corridor, extending through Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, is exactly what makes Wednesday so uniquely hazardous. So, the really crucial takeaway here is that millions of folks are sitting right in the direct danger zone midweek. We're talking about major hubs like Houston, Baton Rouge, and Birmingham. And listen, we aren't just talking about a heavy downpour. We're looking at widespread, damaging wind gusts, large to very large hail, and a seriously high probability of isolated, discrete tornadoes spinning up right ahead of the main storm line.
Part 4. Flooding warnings. Tornadoes always seem to grab the headlines, right? But there's a quieter yet equally deadly secondary threat compounding this whole system. Immense rainfall dropping in very, very short windows of time. Through May 10th, the Ohio Valley and Deep South corridors face extreme flooding risks. If you are in Lexington, Nashville, Atlanta, or Jackson, Mississippi, the sheer volume of water is going to quickly overwhelm drainage systems. Residents absolutely need to have their flash flood plans ready to go right now. And finally, Part 5, frost risk. This whole situation brilliantly illustrates just how incredibly dynamic our continental weather can be.
While half the country is getting battered by moisture-rich, severe storms fueled by that southern trough, the cold front sweeping in right behind it is pulling down a shockingly dry, sub-freezing air mass over the Northeast and the Appalachians. It's literally a nation divided by fire and ice right now. To be specific, we're looking at temperatures plummeting below freezing early Sunday morning in states like Michigan, Ohio, Eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York. If you live up in these higher elevations and you've got a garden or crops, you have got to cover your plants immediately. This intense, dry freeze will easily wipe out fragile spring vegetation practically overnight. So, looking ahead a bit to Mother's Day weekend, the long-range forecast is keeping the country distinctly split. The Pacific Northwest and the Plains are finally going to see some drier, warmer weather. That is fantastic news for farmers in the upper Midwest who desperately need dry fields to plant their soybeans and corn. But if you're hanging out on the East or Gulf coasts, you'll definitely want to prepare for a cooler, wetter than average Mother's Day. Our atmosphere really is just this massive, interconnected engine. Decoding things like dew points, troughs, and cold fronts isn't just dry textbook theory. It's exactly what equips us to be proactive. As these atmospheric ingredients become increasingly volatile, how can mastering these storm mechanics, just like we did today, keep your community safer from nature's wrath? Keep that question in mind the next time you look up at a darkening sky. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Stay safe out there and always be prepared.